perks of having a best friend who's a therapist. She said something that kind of set me free, where she was like, why don't you want to grieve? And I'm like, I just feel like it's pointless to be sad all the time. I don't know what it's gonna do. Like, in my mind, I couldn't wrap, like, you're looking at me like, what?
Because I have something to say, but I want to let you finish.
I really felt like this is not gonna do anything. It's not productive. And, she broke it down for me really, like, practically. And she says, think about another big major change in your life. She's like, your wedding. When you got married, there was joy, there was happiness, there's excitement. And the year planning to your wedding, you allowed yourself to experience those emotions of joy and happiness, and they were celebrated, and you talked about it. This is also a big milestone in your life where you've lost the person who's completely fundamentally, shaped who you are, but you will not allow yourself to go through the process of being sad in the same way.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Care to Talk. I am your host, Caroline, aka Care Bear, aka Care. I have a very special guest friend, sister, and her name is Jessica Brusch. Jessica, welcome.
Well, hello. And just a note, I love seeing you do this. I'm glad you love doing it. I love seeing you do it.
Thank you. I feel like this is a full circle moment for us because we've been like talking on the fly about our own experiences, life experiences for like years now in passing. And we're always like, okay, we got to sit down and talk about this.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy that finally we get to unpack our lives a little bit together and share. And hopefully, someone's inspired by our stories.
We've been talking about a lot and totally been rooting for you to do it. And so I've said this before, I'll say it again, I'm so proud of you and happy that you're doing it and that I get to be doing this beside you today. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, Jessica, who are you? Who is Jessica? Who is Jessica Brusch? If someone didn't know you, what would you say to them?
That is like, oh gosh, girl. I am a wife and a proud mom. Love my babies. I have 3 babies under 5. Yeah.
Woo!
Busy.
How you do it?
Grace of God.
Literally.
And a husband, So, he definitely helps. I have been married for 8 years this year. So.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's exciting stuff. Entrepreneur. So I have a business with my husband called the Laundry Hub. We do that.
Nice.
And then I'm a mortgage broker. I help people get into homes, which is busy. Yeah, it is. And then on top of that, I love serving my community, part of our church community and our worship team, and just trying to do all the things,
So she's a mom, she's an entrepreneur, she's a wife, she's a worshiper, she loves the arts. I love it all.
Yeah.
I love it all.
Living life,
Yeah. Well, amidst all of the busyness, I'm so grateful that you're sitting here with me today. And let's get into all that we're going to get into today. So first, before we get into the deep stuff, I wanted to start a little lighthearted. And I asked you when you came in to do something for me, which was to pick up a mug that spoke to you. I am so much of a mug person. I love mugs. My friends buy me mugs all the time. And which one did you choose?
I chose this one right here. Yeah, my favorite color is green.
No way!
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Everyone, it's like when I tell people my favorite color is green, they're like, really? I'm like, why is that a surprise? They're like, you look like a green person, but I love green. But aside from the color, the word that just really stuck out to me on this is a couple of things, but resilient.
Yes. Oh, it's on the cup.
It's on it.
Resilience.
And I just I don't know, that's life, right? Resilience. And I just think that's such an appropriate theme for what we're talking about today. So
jeez, what a way you just connected that.
Lord, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, that would be that.
We're drinking peppermint tea together. Yep, we're tea twins. I just got this nice, what is it? What color is this? Taupe?
Yeah.
Beige one, because I have a sense, whenever I talk to you, I just feel so calm.
Do you really?
Yeah, super calm and just calm and confident, and I just feel like I'm heard. I'm not just talking to someone. I really feel like you listen.
Thank you.
And
I'm so glad.
That's so important to me. So
Do you know why I'm laughing? It's not what you're telling me that's funny. I always feel like when people are talking to me, especially on Sunday, which is when I tend to see you at church, my children are just running all over the place.
Chaos.
And I'm just like trying to be present and like trying to make sure this one's not eating something on the ground. Yeah. And so I'm so happy that you feel that way.
No, honestly, every time we talk, I'm like, wow, like there's something about her that just makes me feel so calm. So
that's nice.
Super excited. Okay, now one thing I'm trying to get used to during our segments is sharing a fun fact. So, well, not a fun fact, a really random fact. So I have a random fact for you. Let's break it down together. Animals can experience time differently from humans. Okay. Apparently. So smaller animals, to them, the world around them moves more slowly compared to humans. Okay. Salamanders, lizards, for example, experience the time more slowly than cats and dogs. And this is because the perception of time depends on how quickly the brain can process incoming information. I didn't know that. I thought that dogs and cats and everybody, like, they just like experience the same time as us.
So it's gonna sound really silly. Oh God. Like
we can be silly.
Well, a salamander has a smaller brain, so
well, yeah,
physically, right?
Yeah.
So I guess like
that's
they
true.
would process it slowly.
Maybe, yeah.
Like,
it's interesting. Have you ever had pets?
I did. Not in my like adult like marriage home. My husband's not a pet person, but girl, I had a fish. I had a hamster, I had a cat, I had a dog.
Yeah, all.
Well, I think my siblings just decided that they were going to bring them home, and my parents just dealt. But most recently, the dog was last. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
I had a dog. I had cats too. My brother had cats, and then the cat had kittens, and then we like traded in all of them for a dog because like my mom wanted a dog. And
yeah,
we were like, yeah, let's get a dog. And so I had a dog, and like one thing that like makes this random fact so it makes the world make sense for me is I would be gone for like 5 minutes, like around the block or to the mailbox or something. I would come back home, and my dog Cinnamon, she passed away, but it was Cinnamon at the time, would be so super excited and like jump around and everything when I got back home as if I'd been gone for days.
You hear all the paws on the hardwood floor.
Yeah, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I was just here like 2 seconds ago. So it's so interesting that like now I'm putting, it's all making sense. I'm putting it all in my brain. It's all making sense now.
Why they're like, if you think about animals, their affection is so high.
Yeah.
Most of them anyways. Like, not, but yeah.
And that's why like it's good to have animals for like your mental health, I guess. Because like you always feel important. They're always like, I'm so happy that you're here.
For people, they definitely do provide comfort for people.
Yeah.
I can see that for sure.
Oh, thanks for indulging me in the random fact of the day. I appreciate that. I'm gonna
like share this random fact with somebody. They're gonna be like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Never mind."
Oh my gosh! But I have one really important question for you that I'm gonna ask every single guest that comes on this podcast, and it is, well, it's gonna be varied for every conversation, but for this one in particular,
okay,
Jessica. Care to talk about grieving the loss of a loved one?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah,
okay, let's get into it. How did grief creep up on you? What was your first, maybe not your first, but your first significant experience with grief and loss?
Yeah. So I always like to say, people will say loss, but I always like to say, my dad graduated. My father.
I love that.
He finished his race, and he was the first person that I really experienced grief with. And what was so just kind of like interesting about that whole experience, my dad, he left us when he was 77, and so lived a full life. Everything was great. And so clearly there's nothing tragic about a person living a full life, being around, being present. But in the last, I want to say like 7 to 8 years of his life, I was so fortunate to kind of be around and really kind of see him live out his principles of who he was as a person. And I say that because I bring this back is, in the last few years of life, he had health challenges. So it wasn't uncommon for him to be like in and out of the hospital. Like if someone called and said, okay, like dad's going to the hospital, it made sense to me. Like it was better for him to be there, being in ICU, getting better care. It made more sense. And I've seen death like knock on my dad's door a few times during this year, and him kind of be able to overcome it and it not be an issue. And so in 2022, when he went into the hospital and they were like, yeah, dad's going to the hospital, it never really even crossed my mind that this would be the time, right? And that's what threw me off guard, because he's gone through things so many like this times before. They're like, he's not well, he probably needs to get some extra care. I was like, cool, all good. I'll see him in a couple of weeks. And so dad gets in the hospital. 2 days he's there. He's still not really like coherent, doesn't really understand what's going on. All during COVID. Okay. So like
heavy time.
It was, and it was just different. We weren't able to be present. Nothing was, we couldn't be there. And so, the doctors call us and they say, all right, your dad had a stroke. And so I knew that dad had like, health complications, but he's never had that before. And so it was just kind of like, okay. But even still at that point, it wasn't like, okay, this might be the time that, you might lose your dad. It was kind of like, all right, well, first message was to my pastors, please pray. Dad needs prayer. He needs to get better. Worship team, please pray. Not necessarily thinking that it was time for him to go, but it ended up being the time. And so it was kind of like I wasn't ready for it, like it wasn't uncommon for him to be there. And so when he passed, it was just like, it kind of crept up on me. I didn't really know what to do. And so, kind of going through that process, I always tell people, I did all the things that you're supposed to do when your parent passes. I planned the funeral, I called family, I made sure mom was okay. I did everything I should have done except allowed myself to really be in the moment and grieve. Yeah. So, yeah.
So what goes through the mind of a daughter who loses her father unexpectedly? Like, yeah, what were your first thoughts? I know for me, it's kind of like, oh my goodness, my mom won't be able to see me graduate, because I was 17, 16 at the time, marry, have children. She was like, couldn't wait for grandchildren. So things like that, where I was like, oh man, like this is my reality now. What goes through the mind of a daughter who's losing now her father?
So, I am growing up as a kid, I never knew my grandparents. I didn't know I was able to know my mom's, my biological grandmother, my mother's side, but I didn't know my grandfather. I didn't know my dad's parents. And my prayer always growing up was that, when I have kids, my dad would be around long enough so that they would remember him, that my kids would not grow up wondering, what was mom's parents like, or what was dad's parents like? That was always the thing. And at the time when my dad had passed, I was actually 4 months pregnant with my son. So the first thing, I was just like, that reality of like, oh God, like the thing that I didn't want is happening, and that was some of the first things that kind of went through my mind. But then immediately after that, it really went into the mode of, okay, let me just figure out what's next, right? As a daughter, as someone that's so kind of reliant on their dad having the answers to things and figuring things out, all of a sudden it turned into, okay, I now need to figure it out. I need to figure out how my mom's going to be okay. I need to figure out how the funeral is going to be okay. We need to figure out the money. We need to do that. And that was kind of like the first initial thoughts right after he died. Kind of went into like flight or flight mode. Okay, make sure you're okay. You're having a baby, but then also figure out how to make sure your family is okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting because you think that now in this case you would be able to rewrite that story, like, okay, I didn't know my grandparents, but my children will for sure.
They will, yeah.
Will for sure know my grandparents,
yeah.
But you don't think, and that's the thing, right? Like, none of us think it's gonna hit me next, or it's gonna hit me at all, until it actually hits you. Yeah, until sure. It comes knocking at your door. And so that's definitely one thing I've learned, like in this grief journey, is like just. And like life after that too, with the rest of my life, is like, I don't know when or how my life will unfold, but I'm not exempt from anything. That's something I spoke to another guest about as well. It's like none of us are exempt from this particular thing happening to us. Yeah. That's just a part of life, unfortunately. Yeah. Thank you for answering that. So what was your year of first, like, I know you were a mother already to 2 children, about to mother for the 3rd time. Mm-hmm. It was amidst COVID. Yeah. So what was that year of like first, like with like not having your father around?
So like the thing that I thought was like what we've done really well as a family in terms of just kind of being able to figure out how to work through everything. Things like my dad's birthday, Father's Day, my parents' anniversary, we still get together. Like,
I love that.
Yeah, like even now it's been 2 years on my dad's birthday. We cook all his favorite dishes. We still have a birthday cake and we get together. And so that stuff was kind of really helpful in the beginning. But my first year was kind of really interesting because it was a lot of avoidance for me, to be totally and completely honest with you. Like I said, like, you know, at the time we had just sold there was so much life happening, Caroline. Like, we had just sold our house. We got like this business. We were in the middle of doing all that. I was 4 months pregnant. I felt like I didn't have time to grieve, you know? I just really put that thought in my head. And so the first year was different for me in the sense where a lot of people are like, the first are like really hard. I would say now, post 2 years, my dad passing away, this is now my first year that I've allowed myself to kind of feel his presence, feel the loss of it. And so the first year now being like presence, I miss him. Like, and that's just really the plain and like simple part of it. I just miss him. You know, you search for their presence, you think about them. It's funny, like the other day, I was telling a friend of mine, I said, every time something great happens in my life, he is the first person I think of. The absolute first person that's on my mind. Mm-hmm. You know? Mm-hmm. Just the amazing part of like, we stand on the shoulders of everything my father has done, you know, and you can't help but feel good that you're able to kind of do what you need to do, but you miss them. You want them to see it and you're grateful, you know? So.
Wow. So earlier you said that it's only this year that you're actually feeling like you're experiencing your year firsts.
Oh, it's wild, right?
Whereas it happened a couple years ago.
Yeah, 2022, and now we're 2024.
So can you unpack what you meant by that?
You know, the year my dad passed away, honestly, I was in fight or flight. You know, like I said, I had 2 kids under 3. I'm 3 months pregnant. We just sell our house. We're in the middle of moving. I have these businesses that are going, you know, grieving kind of seemed inconvenient to me. It really did, because it was kind of like, in my mind, the message or the narrative was, yes, it's sad. Yes, it's terrible, but this is pointless. It's not going to bring dad back. It's not going to change anything. We got to figure out how to move forward and get going. And that's kind of been like my MO, right? Just plan, like move forward. But with grief, it's you just really can't do that. And when it's left undealt with, it manifests in other ways in your life in terms of what you're carrying. And so it got to a point where I just kind of got to the end of myself, and I was just like, you know what? I can't not allow myself to experience this. And perks of having a best friend who was a therapist, she said something that kind of set me free, where she was like, why don't you want to grieve? And I'm like, I just feel like it's pointless to be sad all the time. I don't know what it's going to do. Like, in my mind, I couldn't wrap, like, you're looking at me like, what?
Because I have something to say, but I want to let you finish.
I really felt like this is not going to do anything. It's not productive. And, you know, she broke it down for me really, like, practically. And she says, you know, think about another big major change in your life. She's like, your wedding. You know, when you got married, there was joy, there was happiness, there's excitement. And the year planning to your wedding, you allowed yourself to experience those emotions of joy and happiness, and they were celebrated, and you talked about it. This is also a big milestone in your life where you've lost the person who is completely fundamentally, you know, shaped who you are, but you will not allow yourself to go through the process of being sad in the same way. While those feelings are not joy, you still have to allow yourself to experience grief and sadness. There's no way around it. And just kind of understanding that practically, it was kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, like I need to, like I can't randomly, you know, be at a stoplight one day and hear a song and just be bawling.
But you know what? It's interesting because as much as you sit with your grief and like feel like you're healing through it, that still happens. It sure does. It happens to me randomly all the time. And that's something I didn't even have here, but I would love to like talk about too. Like, it literally creeps up on you again, whenever it wants. You can be having the best day of your life and then be like, oh, this is all great, but the one thing I want is this person in my life, and then waterworks.
Grief is a form of a wound, right? And we're always going, like when you have a wound, when you're scarred, it's always going to be there, right? But there's a difference between when you get a wound and it's fresh and it's not healed, you touch it and it hurts. It's very sensitive. It's hard, right? Whereas when you've taken the time to really process and take care of the wound and nurture it and get it better, it's always going to be there. It's always going to be visible, but when you touch it, it won't hurt as much. The whole process for me right now in my journey is getting to a place where I understand that this will always be something that will hurt, but it shouldn't be a thing where when I touch it all the time, it's not healed. And the belief now in this particular time in my journey is I believe that you can heal from grief. In the beginning, it was like, you can't heal this. The person's not coming back. It's going to hurt always. But I believe now that there is a way for you to be able to heal for it. There's healing on the other side. So
you're preaching right now. Okay. Wow. Okay. So then in that case, since there's a way, how did you take the pain that you were going through and transform it into hope?
So I didn't cope well in the beginning. You know, I talk about it a lot. Avoidance was just a really big thing for me. I just didn't cope. It was just easier to ignore it. And, you know, that I'll start by saying right now is completely unhealthy. You know, they talk a lot about, you know, our emotional health impacting our physical. Like, it really did take a toll on me in terms of how I was functioning, even from my mental health perspective. And so it got to a point where it was just kind of like, all right, Lord, I'm at the end of myself. Like, something has got to change, right? There was a point or season, actually, where if you talked to me last year, literally every other week you'd call me and be like, oh, I'm sick. I'm not feeling well. Like, it was really like just always tired. And people would be like, you're sick again? Like, it was just like, and at first it was like, oh my God, you got small kids. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's why you're always sick. After a while, it was kind of like, I just felt like the Holy Spirit was telling me, no, there's more to this. You know what I mean? There's an exhaustion or a weight that you're carrying that you have not sorted out. And so this past year, I actually went into therapy for the first time in my life. Not just random counseling, but I actually went and I said, I'm going to commit to actually seeing someone bi-weekly. And that really kind of started the process for me to really begin to learn how to cope. And the start of that for me in the beginning was just allowing myself to cry. To cry where like it didn't make sense, allowing myself to say, you know what, I really miss my dad today, you know? And then suddenly it was interesting, like if you ask my husband as I started doing this, we'd be in the car and I'd just be crying more randomly.
Oh my goodness. Can I talk about that? Like,
gosh.
There's days I would just be driving home from work or church or wherever, out of nowhere.
Start crying.
Bawling out of nowhere. And like nothing triggered me. I was just driving. No song, no nothing, not seeing anything. Just started bawling out of nowhere. And at first it was like, I was literally one time, I remember crying and like, I was like, what are you doing? Like, I was embarrassed at myself.
Right?
I was embarrassed at myself. And then now I'm just like, no, let yourself do that. You need to release that.
And that's the thing, right? Like in the beginning, when I talk about avoidance, you stop yourself from doing it because you're embarrassed. You're just like, this is very vulnerable. This is very awkward. And also no one else gets it.
That's it.
Right? And like, you know, God bless, you know, my husband, he's amazing. But this is really at the end of the day, and I think a lot of people won't talk about it, this is my journey with grief. As much as he's with me and he's trying to understand, he cannot. His parents are very much here, very much involved in our lives, which is a blessing. But I look at things through a different lens differently now, right? It's so bad that sometimes to the point when we're in the car, the kids will see me cry and they'll be like, you miss Lolo, don't you, mommy? You miss Lolo, which is grandpa. And they just know now, which is...
I love that they know.
It's cute, yeah. They're like, he's in heaven with Jesus? And I'm like, yeah. I just miss him. I'm like, he's better, but mommy just misses him. Yeah.
Why do you think it took you so long to go to therapy?
Because it's hard.
True that.
Like everyone has a busy life. I'm not trying to glorify my life being busy, but I just gave you a resume of everything that's going on. You want me to do all that and then deal with this huge void in my life and this grief? I ain't got the time, right? It's hard, you know, but it's worth the work.
Yeah.
I can now months later say on the other side, it's worth the work. But at the time, it was inconvenient.
Mm-hmm. It took me a long time too. I feel like it took me way more than 2 years, to be honest. Did you do grief counseling or just counseling and then it just so happened to touch on?
We did the counseling because I just knew something was off and I wasn't really intuitive or had a good understanding of what was off. And the first session it came up and it was just kind of like that part.
Okay.
You know, like we have to get through that, yeah. So.
Okay. No, yeah, I think...
How many years did it take you?
oh my God. So my mom passed away in 2010. I probably only did counseling. This is embarrassing. I probably started counseling. I started in 2022.
God, so is it kind of like the same thing, avoidance?
Absolutely. And also the church. Like I grew up like, it was like, just tell Jesus about your problems.
Cast your cares.
Cast your cares. And I love that scripture. That scripture carried me through my grief. But like, I don't think at that time, counseling or therapy was something that the church
really celebrated at that point.
Celebrated and wanted us to do, or saying, okay, yeah, let's do therapy, was like, it was as if you had less faith by doing it that way, and praying was like not enough. But I believe that God equips people to walk through, he equips them to even have the skill to walk through something like that.
Completely. I mean, and I don't know what your experience was like. For me, getting a Christian counselor was very important for me. Yeah. And so to your point, I mean, I love that the church has just shifted now and learned how to celebrate the importance of the practicality of therapy and prayer. Like they work together, right? So,
absolutely. Absolutely. Hand in hand. So can we talk about like how life is never the same and you see life from a completely different perspective post-loss? What did that look like for you? What types of things do you think shifted for you after losing your father?
It's funny, we were talking about this the other day, and I used the analogy around when we got married. So many people, like, best day of my life, love my wedding. Number one thing I remember everyone telling me at my wedding was, oh my gosh, enjoy your life now. Totally do all the things, because when you become parents, your life will be completely different. You will not be the same. And they were totally right. I was a different, we were different people after we became parents. You're forever changed through an experience like that. But nobody says the same thing of your life will become completely different when you lose a parent. You are a different person, right? There's a form of just like emptiness, really. Like there's, for me, and I don't really, I'm still in the process of trying to figure out if that's going away, but there's a little bit of a void, right? Like half of yourself, the person that was so instrumental in developing who you are today. Like I always say, like everything I know about being a good person and a kind human has come from my father, and he's not here, right? So life is different in that sense. You definitely have joy, there's happiness, but there is still a feeling of something like, something's missing, right? I mean, years later, I'm sure, is that the feeling like you still kind of have a bit?
Absolutely. Definitely feel that void. And I think at the time that I lost my mother too, that was really like, I was 16, 17, I think 17. There's also memory loss that comes with that for me. Yeah. I forget a lot. My friends are like, remember when? And I was like, I don't remember that at all. And they're like, how do you not remember that? And I'm just like, I wasn't thinking, we were there, but I wasn't there. And so, yeah, life never the same. I think for me, it was also like a safety that I had with my mom. Like she was like literally like my bestie. And I think we're very similar in a lot of ways. So the safeness that I felt in our just being, I didn't have with anyone else after that. Like, love my family. We all relate to each other in different ways. But I think there's a specific, it's your mom, right? So for me, it was like very, like literally a piece of your life is gone. So yeah, definitely. For me, in terms of like the perspectives, and I'm asking you the questions today, but I'm just gonna, this is a two-way dialogue. Learning, so I do want to share, like, for me, my perspective, and I'll, again, talking about this before, but perspective on like, everything matters, but nothing really matters. Yeah. Like, life is really important, and everything that happens and the people and all that stuff is really important, and how you live it, really important. But at the end of the day, it's like, not really life goes on, because I don't want to dismiss the feeling behind, like, life, but like, I don't take things as serious anymore. Like, when things don't go my way,
it's okay.
It's all right. It's okay. if I feel frustrated in a moment with someone, a family member, whatever, which, yeah, it's like, this doesn't matter because I want to enjoy my moment with you right now. So like, as much as I might be frustrated, I'm going to get over it so much quicker because we're in the here and now and I have you right now. So I'm going to bask in that and not bask in how I feel right now. I'm just going to, and not just dismiss it, because I think it's really important to address how we feel about stuff. And I think that's made me bolder to do that too. But at the same time, it's just like, this all doesn't matter. Like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't matter. And I think I'm at peace. Like I'm a more peaceful person with that mindset.
Do you find, look at me just asking questions.
It's okay. Ask away. This is a conversation.
Do you find that, like, you know, we talk about life changing. Do you find like your relationships with people have changed?
Oh, hey there. I'm here just to interrupt regular programming to say, how are you enjoying the episode so far? If you are, I would love if you could share this video. Share it with someone who might benefit from this conversation. Like this video to let YouTube know that it's an important one online. And leave a comment below if you would like to continue the conversation. If there's anything from the conversation that resonated with you that you would like to share and have conversations with other people who are watching, do that. Also, if you can subscribe to this channel, that would be great, because we want to grow. We want to grow and we want more and more people to talk about topics that matter. One more thing. You might notice the set it's good. It's good. It has potential though to be better. And so we want to get more equipment. We want to up the value of this podcast. And so if you want to partner with us and invest in this podcast, we have details in the show notes so that you can help and sow a seed into a good ground, into what we're doing, so it can reach more people and resonate with more people as well. And I'll see you at the end of the episode.
Like, I find for myself, like, I remember after my dad passed, like, the Denals are one of the first people I thought about. Like, friends that I had that, like, lost parents, I started to reprocess in my mind, like, what that experience would have been for them. And I felt like even when they messaged me, I related to them like differently. There was a sense of softness. Like, yeah, and a sense of understanding. It's like when they say, like, you know, when you have kids, you become friends with people that have kids. Like, you guys understand each other. Yeah. When you lose a parent, you seem to just kind of understand each other different. Like, there's a different like thing. I find that my relationships have changed that way.
So you sought them out.
A little bit more. I think so. I think I felt a little bit more understood by them. I felt more comfort when I would hear from them. Mm-hmm. And when they were like saying, you know, how are things going? I know it's hard. I felt understood a little bit more. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I was definitely not that person. I was like, woe is me. I'm the only person going through this. Like, I was pretty selfish in it. I see that now. Like, I was more selfish. And I was like, I knew other people lost in their lives, but I was like, this is my loss. Like, I'm going through this right now. I think it's now, years later, and I'm getting older and more wise, that I'm realizing how important it is to have connections similar to mine. Like, because that's the thing, like, this is good. Never had this in my notes, but friendships with people who have not experienced significant loss yet, I felt there's a point where I was a bit frustrated or envious around them. Like, or if they didn't acknowledge, like, I have really good friends, like, acknowledge my loss. And then there's some friends that, you know, they just forget. And I don't hold it against them, but I did before. Yeah. But right now I don't. But, like, before it was like, it's Mother's Day. You didn't even message me to say.
But I could see, like, how that would sting, though. Right? And this is what I mean, where I'm just like, people that have gone through it, you guys just relate differently. Yeah. You understand the pain of certain days.
You have a tender heart towards, because you've gone through it yourself. So you know, like, this is how I feel. I feel lonely on a Mother's Day, or on the day that she actually passed. Like, I felt lonely on that day. So let me show up for someone who I know probably feels that way too. Yeah,
for sure.
It would be lovely if the people who hadn't gone through that could think that. Yeah. And then maybe that's why we're having conversations like this, to just make people aware. Because I think it just makes you feel more supported. You
feel understood. Yeah. And I think that as humans,
just to acknowledge it is enough.
I think so. I think some of the greatest things that have happened in my grieving journey, honestly, you don't need to do anything crazy. Like, you don't need to show up with, like, flower baskets or doing that. Honestly, it's really like, hey, it's your dad's birthday today. I remember. Like, I know you're thinking about him. I hope you have a good day.
That's it.
So simple.
It's so simple.
just acknowledging they're still there, it means everything.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah.
I love that. Woo. Okay. Can we talk about lessons that you're learning? So one thing I always say is I feel like my mom is teaching me a lot more in her absence than she did in her presence. And that's not because of the fact that I've been here longer on earth, because I'm not longer on earth than I have been without her. Yeah. But yeah.
You know, your parents forever be talking. Like when you're young, like just like stop. And at the time you're like, okay, like great dad, like thanks.
Yeah.
But it was just, and it's simple stuff, you know, like be a good person, be a person of integrity, all these things that mean things, right? But I remember when my father passed away, you know, so many people showed up to the wake and to the funeral, and there was such an outpouring of even people that we hadn't spoken to since we were a kid. And you know, I talked about how I like doing so many different things, right? And at one point in my life, I feel like I was so hyper focused on God, like what is my purpose? Am I supposed to be singing? Am I supposed to be doing this? Am I supposed to be doing that? Trying to figure out how I can like leave an impact on this earth. And through my father's death and him not even being here, I realized like, you know, you can make an impact on someone's life just by doing the simplest things. Just by being kind, and just really seeing that in his death and the outpouring of people that have come to see us after and said small things like, your dad was just a good man. He was a kind man, and I just wanted to be here and to pay respects. That for me just really freed me a little bit, in the sense that I was like, you know what? You don't always need to do the most. Sometimes you just need to live well, and that is your purpose. Really just being able to leave impact on people's lives that way is more than life. I'm more than enough. And that's been a gift to me, and a lesson that I've learned from my dad that has been really nice.
That's so beautiful. Yeah. And I see that all over you.
Do you?
Yeah. In your presence and how you show up for people, and just your genuine spirit. No doubt that probably came from your dad, even though I never met him. Can you tell me how your faith played a role in your grieving journey?
So I have a hard time answering this one because, remember, I didn't grieve, right? So it's like crazy, because I think that part of it was, you know.
At all, though? You didn't grieve at all?
So I think for me, like, I look at grief as like, grieving is not like a one-time like situation, right? And so it's like, I'll say like, yeah, there were moments I cried. There was a moment I was sad, but I don't know if there was ever a time that I really sat in my sadness and said like, okay, like I'm grieving. What I thought was really interesting about this is, you know, I've seen God do amazing things in my life. You know what I mean? We know the God we serve. You know, I gonna get into it, but I did not think that he could help me with this one. Yeah.
Unpack.
At one point I was like, well, what's he gonna do? Like, and I didn't mean that because I didn't think anything was impossible with God or anything like that. I was just like, but what? Like what? Like, how are you going to make me feel better? The only thing that I can do is give it some time and hope that it's going to get better. So I never really talked to him about it. I never said, hey, God, like, I'm having a hard time with this. Like, I really need you to comfort me at this time. So right now, I would say in this process and in this time where I'm healing, I would say my faith journey at this particular point is I've realized how much God loves me and desires my wholeness. And part of that has been through, like I said earlier, going through therapy, and his love to kind of patiently wait for me and allow people to be put in my life through therapy to give me healing. And so that's kind of what the faith journey is like. But I just wasn't that person that in the beginning when my dad died, where I was holding to scripture, reading word, reciting it. It just... hard. And I really thought that I would be that person, right? Because here I am, like on Sunday, leading worship, leading prayer, like fervently, like intensely for people, interceding. And I cannot even tell you, Lord, help me with my broken heart. Crazy. Right? Like, and so now it's just been really beautiful to feel his love through healing and therapy and through his presence, that like, yeah, I want wholeness for you. I love you. And in this grieving process, I'm with you. You know?
Yeah, I resonate with that so strongly. I think at the beginning of my grieving journey, it was like, God, how could you let this happen? Like, how could you? Like, this is crazy. Like we prayed, we fasted, we did all the things. But then as I was maturing and as I'm still maturing now, I can't help but be in awe and tell God, like in our time together, like, wow, how could you love me so well through this?
For keeping me.
How could you keep me so well through this? Thank you.
For being patient.
Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you that even though I couldn't see your hand in all of this, that now you're unveiling, you're taking off the onion layers and you're showing me your consistency, your faithfulness through this. And although it's hard and not the ideal situation I wanted it to be, one thing's for sure, and it's that his presence has always been there. And I did not run from him the entire time. I did for a little bit throughout my grieving process, but I actually subconsciously was actually running to him throughout.
And that scripture is like comes so alive in my mind now as we talk about, like, the Lord is really close to the brokenhearted. I know it's like a verse that we throw out when someone dies, but it's like he really is, you know. And I think I just have to say, I love that you've shared with me that it took you years. Like, I'm here thinking, like, not that I'm like 2 years, oh gosh, Jessica, like, you really have to wait 2 years, but it really can take people a long time to get there. It's not like a snap, like, hey, let's just grieve and let's just do it. It is really like, it's a little bit of like a marathon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even to like, so writing is like one of my ways of coping with anything hard. I like to write about it, reflect, and even to write about that took time. Like, you know, it took me years to really like, or on and off. Like, I would feel okay sometimes to write about how I feel. And then other times it was like, I want nothing to do with my journal because it's just too much emotion that I wasn't ready to face. So yeah, timing is super important in the grieving journey. It's like we don't all experience it at the same time in the same ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes some of us longer than others. Sometimes some of us might think that we get over at least the first hump of grief because it doesn't really end. But there's actually so much more that we don't realize is waiting for us. Do you believe that? I know what your answer is going to be, but I just want to hear more of what you think about grief being like this lifelong journey.
I think it's true. I think at different phases or part in the journey, it's not going to hurt as much. But I said it earlier, right? Like, life is full of amazing things, and us being different, I'm always going to think about my dad when something happens, you know? And that's wild to think, right? Like, my kids are probably going to graduate from high school or university in 15 years. And it's quite possible I might still think about him then, right? And that's a form of grief. So it is a little bit of a lifelong process, but I do believe it can get easier and lighter.
There's a quote that talks about grief meaning, like, you experiencing grief means that you have loved very hard and very well. So it's like inevitable for you to grieve the same degree to which you've loved that person. How do you feel about that quote?
Yeah, there's another quote that I love so much that I always think about with my dad. What is grief but love preserving?
Whew.
Right? And I saw that one.
Love preserving.
Yeah. Right?
Or like, there's one too.
Yeah.
It's like that love that has nowhere to go.
Oh my gosh.
Because it's specific to that person.
Yeah.
And it has nowhere else to grow and flourish because that person's gone.
It's so true, right? I mean, these are like the people that we talk about in terms of our grief and our love are people that have impacted us so much. And it's like their presence is no longer there. You know? I don't even know what to say.
The fact that we are grieving, we feel this loss so intensely just means that we are blessed. So blessed enough to love someone so strongly.
I know. Can you imagine the honor of really loving or being that impacted by someone to also feel this so much from them as well too?
Yeah. Woo! Okay. One more question for you. What's one thing that you wish to share with anyone who might be experiencing the loss of a parent, a family member of any kind? How would you encourage them today?
We cannot, and I talked a lot this about earlier, you cannot avoid getting rooted in your life. You really can't. But what you can do and what you can be in control of is the process to healing it, you know? And I talked earlier about the fact that, you know, grief is like a womb, and, you know, essentially the whole analogy about like, it will always be there, but, you know, when you touch it, it shouldn't necessarily hurt. You know, I think about things, so many things in terms of my personal care associated to my kids. If my kid had like a womb on their hand, if it's longer than 2 weeks, I'm worried. I'm trying to think, hey, how do I fix this? How do we address this? How do we get it better? The same thing kind of has to be applied in terms of how we care about ourselves. And our grieving journey. Totally understand that everybody moves at our own pace, but when we don't take the time to heal our traumas and to heal our pains, i.e. grief, they turn into other problems, right? And so I would encourage a person that's kind of going through the process of grief, whether it be through a parent or through someone, to go through the process of healing, seeking help, you know? Avoidance is not the answer. Never. It's not, and it's the easiest thing to do, but avoidance is really not the answer. So I pray that people are encouraged about the idea of therapy and healing and seeking help to go through the process of healing our wounds. So,
also, one thing you taught me today is just like really taking advantage of the people in your life who share your experience. Community is super important, and it's something I shied away from. And I think a part of me also like didn't want to lose so strongly again. So you kind of like retract from having really, really close relationships. Yeah. And therapy taught me that. Therapy taught me that I was pushing people away, and that's not healthy either. So, yeah, community I would add on to prayer, spending time with the Lord, and walking with Him through the grief. Also therapy, and then community, 100%.
Look at us out here growing.
Look at us growing. I couldn't see myself here a few years ago. Several years ago. Yeah, but I'm so grateful, and I'm so grateful that you are here and were willing to talk to me. I know it was something so big to share, but thank you so much for sharing part of your heart with us. Is there anything else that you want the world to know? Anything that the Lord is saying right now? Or, yeah.
Well, thank you, first of all, for doing this. I think that there's not a ton of... One of the things that I would say is right after my dad died, I was searching for platforms and for resources to try to figure out how people that look like me and you relate to grief, and I just could not find anything, and that was really hard. So thank you so much. I want to honor you just for creating this space and opening up this conversation. I think it's super important. But really and truly, I just want to encourage, you know, the Lord is really close to the brokenhearted. I believe that so clearly now, just going through my process, and I want to encourage anybody that's kind of going through their grieving to know that God is with you and He loves you, and there is healing on the other side of it. So, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited, and hopefully this is the one of many more conversations that
I hope so.
I love you, truly.
I'm forever rooting on the Donnell family.
We love you too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you for sticking around. Wasn't the show awesome? I hope that you enjoyed our guests. If this is something that resonated with you, please like the video, share it with someone that you know, and subscribe to the channel. Also, feel free to leave a comment below and keep the conversation going. If you're an audio listener, you can leave a review on any of our audio platforms. Also, let me know what you care to talk about. Any topics of interest that you think would be great for the podcast, please let me know by sending an email. The email is also in the show notes. That's it. That's all. Thank you so much, and see you guys very, very soon. Bye.